Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, April 2nd, 2020. There's nothing to celebrate today in terms of calendar holidays. I don't think it's not April Smart Person's Day or anything like that. No, April 2nd, we're on to another month, and I think we're done with the April Fool's jokes. I guess we may have an update from one that slipped by undetected yesterday, as I recall. I think right after the show, Greg sent me a note, and maybe I can bring it up here too, because I think it's still in the notes column here. Yes, it turns out, or at least someone has come to the conclusion that it may possibly have been someone's idea of an April Fool's joke to put out the story of the 2-minute COVID test beating out the 5-minute COVID test, which beat out the 7-minute test. I'm not positive that they're right, that it's actually a joke, and I guess the company that whose name was attached to the test, I guess, continues to insist that it's actually true. So it would be a very poor April Fool's joke if you never even got around to saying, oh yeah, April Fool's, by the way, but hey, maybe we missed that. And of course, it is the reporting of the Washington Examiner that alleges that this was an April Fool's joke, so you never know. I mean, maybe that's an April Fool's joke. I have no idea. I don't think it works very well. I think it falls into the category of the sorts of April Fool's jokes that no one finds funny, and I can't understand why anyone would find it funny. Not because it's sensitive material or anything. I can understand joking about that. But the idea that, there allegedly is a real 7-minute test over in South Korea, and Abbott Labs says their test takes about 5 minutes, although I think they're probably not entirely accurate about that. So, I mean, the idea that somebody knocked 3 minutes off the test cycle, I mean, it could happen, but it falls into the category of jokes that my kids, I guess, tried to come up with back in the day before they really understood what April Fool's was or what jokes really were, where I would ask them on April Fool's Day questions like, what do you want for lunch? And they would say, soup. April Fool's, I'll have a sandwich. Nah, you didn't really get me on that one. You just told me false information, and that's not actually funny. All right. I guess we could take a brief look at it later, but basically they tried to contact the company, and they looked on the FDA website, and they decided that their examination of the FDA website didn't yield the results they needed in order to believe that there was a somewhat suspect company name, right? Bodysphere, no one had ever heard of them. But Bodysphere, whoever puts out press releases on their behalf, I think continues to maintain that they have a 2-minute test. If they don't, we'll take the 5-minute test. If that doesn't really work, I'll take the 7-minute test. But it doesn't matter anyway, because nobody's giving us any tests because of the collapse of the federal government. Okay. Moving on, then, Daily Coast Radio is live now, which has always been able to get on the air, occasionally, with occasional delays, but usually under 2 minutes. We can bring that to bear. Bill in Portland, Maine, is checking in with us this morning. I now have Skype has popped up in my way here because Greg's here. But I'll tell you, Daily Coast Radio is live now. Politico is reporting that Kagro X, me, David Waldman, has quietly become a pivotal figure in the coronavirus response. Is that good? I don't know. It beats out Jared Kushner. He's taller than I am. If they're hanging the keys to the coronavirus office higher than I can reach, I guess he'll be able to get there. But otherwise, qualifications-wise, I think it's a toss-up, to say the least. Greg Dworkin is here this morning. I know you can't believe it, but there's so many other things you can't believe. I'll just let you lay it out in order, unless I have to choose doors. Good morning.
No doors today.
Okay.
But don't worry, I do have a pointless and rambling story to tell you.
All right, good.
Which actually does have a point at the end.
Does it last 2 hours? I'm very tired.
I'll try to make it last at least for the first segment until 9:30.
Excellent.
So we have this incredible headline from Politico.
Oh.
Just incredible. I mean, what a suck up. It's called Behind the Scenes, Kushner Takes Charge of Coronavirus Response, and actually talks about the bumbling he's doing. But the real headline should have been, Jared Kushner kills more people than otherwise would have been necessary. Because when you read the article, that's in fact what's happening here.
Yeah, okay. Well, I haven't read it. I've seen excerpts or people screaming obscenities.
Yeah,
about
I mean,
excerpts.
it's a total suck-up article. I mean, people do that.
Yeah.
But it's just phenomenal in the midst of what's going on. And by the way, of course, we have now 6.6 million unemployment claims going on.
Another. Yeah, that's right.
So all of you who have time because you're sheltering at home like your medical advisors tell you, really ought to read up on Herbert Hoover.
Okay. Right. Vacuum cleaner guy.
Because, we're looking at a second Great Depression here.
Yeah, well, it certainly looks, it has all the makings of it. It just, I don't know. I haven't read a book that said it was so yet. I have to wait for the book to come out.
Oh, you have to wait for the book. Okay. Well, somebody has to declare it. Maybe AP. Oh, well, they didn't really ever declare Iowa either, so maybe we should wait for that.
Okay.
So let me tell you my pointless rambling story, but before I do, I have to give you this headline. New investigators arrested a California train engineer after he allegedly derailed a train in a bid to crash into the U.S. naval ship Mercy, the hospital ship treating non-COVID-19 patients at the Port of Los Angeles, prosecutors say. He felt it was all part of a government takeover plot. You see?
The boat.
They didn't show a picture of him, but I'm figuring he looks like a frog, and he's smiling as he pulls the train whistle.
Maybe. He could be a Q guy. He could be, I'm not certain. Well, I don't know where he learned that you could hit a boat with a train.
Like a dead giveaway, But this goes along with Tony Fauci getting Secret Service protection because people are trying to kill him.
Yes. So that makes more sense than hitting a boat with a train.
So, people are getting crazy because stuff is getting bad out there.
Yes. True. Lots of crazy conspiracy theorists are out there. And if you let them, they'll occupy your whole day. To try not to do that, but this is the sign of, I assume, more craziness to come.
Right. So let me just tell you a story, and it's, just to normalize things and bring it back down to earth.
All right, great. Sure.
So oddly enough, I was occupied a lot of yesterday, not just with the pandemic stuff and blogging and this and that and everything else. Wednesdays are my days to do the pundit roundup. But we also had in our shelter-in-place home here a bit of a problem, and that is that in Connecticut, we're rural enough so that we're not hooked up to sewer lines. We have septic tanks.
Okay.
Right, and so the line that leads from the bathroom to the septic tank got clogged. This is not good.
No.
Right,
never.
And you find out about it when you flush the toilet and it doesn't go where it's supposed to. Now, nothing messy. I mean, just, clean water came out, but still it was coming out around the bottom of the toilet bowl. And it's not because the seal is broken. It's because the outlet is blocked. Now, this has happened before. I lived in this house 30 years. And when I first got here from New York City, I didn't know about any of this stuff. You learn.
Yeah.
We had, when you lose power, you don't have water, which is like really weird because they're like different elements,
Yeah.
But if you have a well pump, that's what happens. In New York, you just use the tank at the top of the building. And I looked at the house and there was no tank at the top of the building, which is really weird. So we got to get used to that. And so what do? We've had this happen often enough. It happens every 15 years or so. So we call the septic guy and he comes in and he pumps the septic tank and then looks at the outlet and has us do a couple of courtesy flushes and nothing happens. And so he said, all right, the thing is clogged. And what we do is we take a snake, our snake, we don't have to do your snake, and we snake out the pipe and we get rid of the grease or whatever it is that's plugging there. And they do that and it's fixed.
That sounds like a good job.
Right. So this is in the middle of a pandemic. So you call the septic tank people and they say, okay, well, we'll be right over. We're not that busy. And in fact, they come right over. And so, my point number one is that life goes on and people are still working, even though 6.6 million people applied for unemployment. There are other people who are working, and like regular folks are out there working during the pandemic, even though it's a pandemic, because, depending upon how you argue it and whether or not it happened to you.
Yes.
this is an essential job. You can't live in the house if you don't have plumbing.
That's true. I have been thinking about plumbers and electricians as essential people. Thankfully, I haven't needed them yet. But
Right, but if you need them, they're like truly essential.
Right. Well, I mean, how do you keep the freezers and bathrooms and sinks working at the supermarket?
So the guy comes, and, this is a small town. Everybody knows everybody else. And the original septic guy that I called, who usually pumps us, couldn't come because his truck was broken. So he called the guy who trained him, and these guys came. Literally, everybody knows everybody else.
New Englanders.
So the guy and his son, who were the septic tank people.
Yeah, son's 80. So I'm imagining the guy who trained him.
20, the guy's about 55 or 60 or so. Okay. And while his son is doing all the work, the owner of the company and I are just chatting. So he says, I said to him, look, I'm just really grateful you came out here in the middle of a pandemic. I'm going to stand 6 feet away from you while we chat and all that. Mm-hmm. And he said, really? You think this stuff is like serious? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm a doctor. And he goes, oh, good, doc. Listen, tell me about what's going on, what's really going on.
Okay,
is it really that serious?
I was going to have you examine.
So we have a nice chat about pandemics. I basically gave him yesterday's show.
Oh, good. All right.
Okay. And he says to me, okay, maybe I should take it more seriously than I should have. And I said, look, I don't like to talk politics, but Trump is basically responsible for killing us all, Okay. And he said, I kind of like Trump, but, for this, I do sort of blame him. I mean, you're telling me it's really serious and we should have done something 6 weeks earlier, right? And I said, yep. And he said, all right, well, keep that in mind. And that's how you talk to people one way or the other.
Yeah, right. Get that job
I learned that septic folks have super high tech hand sterilization stuff in their trucks. Given what they do,
right?
They're washing their hands all the time.
I
said to him, you're probably better protected than most people. You got sanitizer in the truck. You got a hand washing station in the truck. You got all this stuff.
Excellent.
And so, use it.
Yeah.
Don't let your truck get hijacked by somebody who gets desperate for what you have here.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess those are the least hijacked trucks in the world.
You'd think until they hear the show.
All of a sudden, people are like,
now all of a sudden,
I can't wait to get
Secret Service protection because I didn't know you had a sanitizing station in the truck. I want that truck.
And yet it makes so much sense.
I want it at the beginning of the day before you go out for your first case, but I want the truck.
That's right. Get them early.
Get them early, right? If you're going to get them at all, get them early.
Yeah, I mean, you learn something new every day. And again, it makes a lot of sense. And I can't believe I never thought, of course, they would have that built into the truck. And, what was I thinking? That they were just walking around saying, yeah, whatever.
They just go from job to job to job and they never shower. Yeah. What do you think? Of course they do. And so they're taking care of themselves. People are taking care of themselves. And you can, in fact, go about your business if you have to. You just have to be smart about it and do it safely. And by the way, the second part of the story is, there are Trump people like Mike Francesa. He knew about Mike Francesa. I talked to him about it.
Yeah.
He's exactly the kind of person that Francesa is talking to.
Yeah, right. So I listen to him all the time. Did he? I don't know.
First time, long time. Yeah,
All right. Wow. Okay. So that I guess is not as shocking that he would listen to Mike Francesa, but I'm fascinated by the truck thing.
Yeah, well, so was I. So, I just thought that was a little interesting tidbit. And there are people who are on the front lines of doing this, whether it's the grocers or whether it's folks like him or the emergency people that come to your house because something breaks and you really, despite social distancing, have to have somebody over. They're all heroes. Yeah. Everybody's doing their part. People are really doing the social distancing thing. So this is from the Washington Post today, just published. Social distancing works. The earlier the better. California, Washington data show. 2 weeks into mandatory stay-at-home orders in the San Francisco Bay Area and Washington State, there's evidence the curve of infections is flattening compared with other U.S. metro areas, although it's complicated. And one of the complications is a place like New York City, which has 9 million people on a normal day. This is not normal day anymore. Taking a subway.
Yes.
Right? You don't have that in California and Washington. So that close packed situation is perfect for spreading virus. And who takes the subway? It's not the upper middle class bankers who are staying at home and doing their banking job from home on their computers and their broadband.
Yeah.
It's like regular folks who are commuting from Brooklyn and Manhattan to Manhattan or Queens to Manhattan and so on and so forth. And so the poorer you are, the more you have to take public transportation. You don't have a car. And you certainly couldn't afford to park it in New York City. That costs as much as a month's rent.
Right, forget that.
And so, no exaggeration. So who's going to be most exposed? And so controlling spread in a place like New York City is like really super difficult. And yes, I know there are places like Seoul. They have 38 million people, and you can look at Japan and see how they pack them into the subways. With a subway packer. There's people whose job it is to push everybody in and then close the doors.
They wear gloves now.
There's a lot of places that have that kind of packed situation, not just New York City, but in this country, New York City is pretty dense. And people will tell you people from New York are pretty dense too, right? I know that. I'm from New York, and people tell me that all the time. So. It's just a difficult thing to control, and to get a sense of where we're at. That's why we're looking at that model that was done by the University of Washington people in order to get an idea of what's to come. And we were talking about this on the show yesterday, and so we got some more data because it comes in every day. And for example, in Connecticut, the model suggested that we were going to have about 14 deaths per day. I think we had 16 yesterday. So the model is tracking. And according to the model, we'll hit peak in about 13 days. Peak for Connecticut is going to be about 40 deaths a day. All right. And on April 12th, we have 39 by the model. April 13th, 41. It peaks at 43 on the 17th, and it doesn't drop below 40 until the 22nd. So what I'm saying is it's about a week's worth of peak.
Oh,
and
okay.
That's coming in a week.
That'll feel flat rather than peak.
So peak isn't like the one day it was really high, and then the day after that it's
right.
It's
at
lower.
11 a.m.
The whole week it's going to be a really bad week, and it's going to be a bad week in Connecticut in a week. And then you can look at New York and look at similar data. And New York had about 401 deaths yesterday, most of which were in New York City. And they hit their peak on the 10th. So we're looking at 8 days until the peak. And let's pick 800 deaths a day because that's New York. So on the 8th, which is less than a week from now, we're going to hit 819 deaths a day. It peaks at 850, and it doesn't drop below 800 until the 14th. So we're looking at about 6 days worth of peak. So this is the next 2 weeks is what we really have to get through. That's what Andrew Cuomo was trying to tell everybody for the past 2 months. And while this is going on, you still have Republican governors who are complete idiots. We have Ron DeSantis, who is closing some things but not everything in Florida. Yes. And, of course, the churches can go on because you can't mess with that. You have Brian Kemp in Georgia,
right,
who yesterday said the incredible, well, we're going to have some local closings here, especially in the parts of the state that are highest hit, because we just found out, we didn't know this until yesterday, but asymptomatic people can spread this.
Everyone was shocked to find out that he was shocked to find that out.
Yeah, so the question on the table is he stupid or is he lying?
Right, not immediately obvious.
It could be both.
It has to be lying, at least a little, right?
Well, you have to be lying. I mean, everybody knew this. It's like Trump saying nobody knew this until last week that this was going to be a problem when Joe Biden wrote an editorial about it in January.
Yeah. I don't know what he was spending his time on. And, I guess the pursuit of the Duke boys is always a constant distraction in Georgia. But other than that, pick up a newspaper. Anybody would have told you this. And also, I understand that the CDC is somewhere nearby. In your...
What was the name of the guys who were trying to corner the orange juice market in trading places? Were they Dukes also?
Yeah, right. Yes, they were.
I didn't know which Dukes you were running after.
Get both of them, first of all.
Right, the Dukes of Hazzard and the Dukes of Wall Street.
Yes, they come together as a bit of a Trump coalition. The Duke boys from either side of the spectrum. But I was thinking not Randolph and Mortimer Duke, but Bo and Luke. I should have gone that way.
Yeah. Well,
they had exploding
in
arrows.
any case,
very
there's
dangerous.
Something of a number of positive cases by diagnosis of cases in New York City that appear to be flattening. I'm sending you the direct link so you can take a look. It's called the Daily Count. It's about midway down the page there. And so the number of cases per day does appear to be flattening. April 1st has tiny number of cases, but that's because they're not finished reporting yet. So for the last 3 days, 161, 151, and 148. So that does seem to be flattening a little bit. And on March 26, 140, 142, 148. So it's not spiking. So that's a little bit encouraging. But when you look at the admissions data from New York, it's not all that much better. So we're still at issue here in terms of not hitting peak. And I just want to let people know it's going to be this week is going to be a bad week for unemployment. Next week's going to be a bad week for deaths and unemployment.
Yes. Well,
so
nothing
just
is.
Still yourself, just don't pretend that it's all, a hoax and stuff like that. Now, new polling about this. Jim Acosta, by the way, says Trump advisor working with White House officials on messaging for pandemic said Trump, quote, took a gamble, end quote, that warmer weather would cause coronavirus to dissipate, siding with aides pushing back on dire warnings coming from the doctors. He took a gamble and got it wrong, the advisor said. So the idea that people didn't know is BS. Of course he knew. He decided not to pay attention.
Right.
That's a completely and totally different thing.
Right. And good pushback. That's not a gamble, for one thing. Of course, he didn't have any. He didn't really have any stake in the game. He doesn't care if people die. He wasn't really putting up any stakes. The stakes was everybody else's lives. And remember that the gamble was that the side he was betting on was that a miracle would come. He just said it's still just
and
like
then
a
a miracle happens. Is exactly right.
Yeah. So not a bet. And it also wasn't the gamble. He didn't, people in a gambling situation, people take a specific action. Here is money. I bet this will happen. And then there are consequences. He just sat by and watched, like if I watch a movie on TV, I don't gamble on the movie. I just watch it.
Right. Meanwhile, polls are coming in.
That was a good spin.
The MSN tracker shows that whatever Trump bounce there was is gone now.
Well done on explaining that. I think there were still people out there saying, well, I don't understand this bump, except our listeners. They knew. They understood.
That they did.
Well done.
Also,
that's you.
The MSM tracker also looks at individual states, which I thought was interesting. Again, don't take this to the bank in terms of what the actual poll numbers mean for November.
Bank's open. You can.
But if you're looking for trends, Wisconsin, Trump 42, Biden 50. Wisconsin has turned blue when it had been purple for months, is my point.
Okay.
Same with Florida. Florida has been purple for months. Now it's blue. Trump 40, Biden 50.
Wow. Okay.
And that's going to be true even more so as Trump's demographic gets hit with coronavirus.
Yes. It's happening in the villages.
So they're the people that were out dancing and saying, I don't pay attention to this. I'm a people person.
Yes.
So, we have that, but there's actually a real poll out of Wisconsin, the MU Law poll, came out yesterday with Biden +3, even though Trump's favorable rating is okay, something we've told you all along. There's a rally effect that's going to have Democrats saying, I'm so glad he's letting Fauci talk, so they give him a few extra points, but that doesn't mean they're voting for him. Right. And so Trump had been leading by a point or two, and now Biden's leading by 3. And that's at the beginning of this. That's before today's jobs numbers. That's before next week's jobs numbers. Yeah. That's before today's death count. That's before next week's death count. Right. So everybody treating this like a politics as usual thing, based on the previous model, this is what's going to happen. Don't know what they're talking about. They just don't. Or they don't accept it, or it's too much for them to incorporate into thinking differently and they can't yet, or they're in denial. I don't know what it is. But analysts looking at this and saying, well, this is what always happens, and therefore, and it's happened up until now, and LOL, nothing matters, and just forget them. They don't know what they're talking about.
This would certainly be the sort of thing that could disrupt the normal model.
What about the Civil War? In the Civil War, things didn't really change. It's true, actually. Partisanship was pretty high during the Civil War, and the Civil War wasn't enough to change that until the end.
Right. I remember in the Ken Burns series that they were playing the violin and people were writing home to their wives saying, dearest Prudence, LOL, YOLO.
Nothing matters, right? You only live once.
Right. Yeah.
That's what they were saying, it's just like them.
Right.
On the other hand, the Great Depression changed things. And so that's why I think everybody should go and study Herbert Hoover.
Yeah. Right. He did not poll well. I'd like to see some polling on what do you think of the federal government spending millions of dollars on an order of 100 or 1 million body bags? Is that
right?
Are you approved generally? Well, see, he may experience.
Well, there's another report
right?
out today that
Democrats
Trump wants to send those 2-minute, 5-minute, 7-minute rapid tests to rural areas.
Yes.
Especially in red states, and he doesn't want to send it to blue states who need it. The blue states need it because the medical care people on the front lines need to know whether they are infected or not.
Yes,
and whether they can go to work or not. Mm-hmm. But he wants them in rural areas where there isn't much virus.
Yeah. Well, although I will say, maybe the slower pace will help things work better. I noticed that when he set it up at the table at his press conference, he put it upside down on the table, and he couldn't figure out why the door wouldn't stay open.
Sometimes people ask things like, well, what's the chance that if you get a positive test, it's really positive? Or what's the chance if you get a negative test, it's really negative? Mm-hmm. And the answer is always, it depends. What do you mean it depends? It depends how much of the disease is there. If there's almost no disease in your area and you get a positive, it's going to be a false positive, and a false negative is probably true. If there's a ton of disease in your area, then a positive probably isn't a false positive.
I see. Okay.
So even the idea of, well, if they have the testing, they can just get things done early doesn't make any sense. If you don't have a lot of virus, you shouldn't be testing at all.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I like the idea.
Well, I'm doing it for political reasons. It makes it look like I'm helping my people.
Yes. Well,
and screwing the blue people, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, they love to own us.
Navigator polling on how that's going next after the break.
Excellent. Okay, we'll wait for 2 minutes. Regroup. Get yourself ready. Call the septic guys if you need to wash your hands. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Continue on into our second segment here. As promised, unlike the president, you delivered here, Greg. We're on to our second segment.
Yeah, here we go. So Shana Gadarian, who is a political scientist, has more evidence that partisanship matters in the coronavirus pandemic. In our survey, the authors find that partisans blame different actors for the lack of preparedness. Asked to rank who is to blame, Democrats blame Trump, Republicans spread blame around. Right? Who is most responsible? This is Donald Trump. Let me send you this because the graphs are just really fascinating. And before I send it to you, guess who Republicans blame the most?
Obama?
Yes, of course.
Oh,
because after all this time, he's still black.
Sure.
Right? So who's responsible for the lack of preparedness for coronavirus? Mm-hmm. Rank Trump, Obama, the CDC, and state health agencies. So Democrats blame Trump the most. Republicans blame Trump the least.
Okay. You're wrong.
Obama, Republicans blame equally Obama and the CDC and are less likely to blame state health agencies. State health agencies are least blamed.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that. All right.
Now, who's least responsible? Who's the least responsible? Democrats overwhelmingly say Obama.
Yes.
And
he's not there.
Right? And Republicans say Trump is least responsible.
Huh.
Okay, but then after that, Obama's next least. And CDC really comes out pretty bad in this.
Okay.
All right? Because a lot of people blame CDC.
Huh.
Republicans certainly do. Democrats do. It's just that Democrats are willing to blame Trump mostly. Now, as media attention increases, this is interesting. Democrats put the most blame on Trump compared to Obama, the states and the CDC. Republicans increase blame of Obama the more bad press comes out.
All right.
Remember, he's black. You got to blame somebody. In other words, the sub-message here is that the seriousness of this is getting through. It's penetrating. And if the deaths don't do it, the unemployment rate will, and vice versa.
And Obama
so at least they're looking for somebody to blame because they get it. It's bad.
I guess that's something.
Right, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What does it mean when somebody told you it wasn't bad and then you find out it is? But Shana's last point here, social media reinforces blame on the other party's leader, but for independents, having a diverse social media diet increases blame for Trump. And I asked her, she's going back out in the field in a week, so as things get worse, she'll be able to compare. So at least this is a baseline.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? If you have no social media, Democrats blame Trump and Republicans blame Obama. Okay? And if you have diverse social media, it turns out that really doesn't change things all that much with Republicans and Democrats, but with people who are considered neither, the independents out there. Diverse social media means you're more likely to blame Trump. So, again, that message comes through over time. Now, Navigator polling, which is doing a daily tracking poll, has results for today, communicating about coronavirus. And the communications about it is certainly a major interest of mine, as listeners know. Americans say they are concerned by Trump's failure to take responsibility and by his chaotic handling of the pandemic. Those with mixed views on Trump are especially worried about the challenges faced American healthcare worker. The public supports social distancing broadly and strongly opposed to Trump's proposal to end it soon. Well, he's dumped that, so that's not even an issue anymore. Yes. Remember, he went from 15 days of mitigation to 30 days of suppression to 90 days of pretending it goes away, whatever it is they're doing. So early mistakes, lack of accountability, and ongoing shortcomings in the coronavirus response trouble most Americans, including many with mixed views on Trump. Please indicate whether each statement raises concerns about Trump's handling of the issue. Donald Trump downplayed the threat of the coronavirus earlier on, letting it get worse when we should have been preparing. Overall, 58% agree with that, or at least have concerns about it. And if you're mixed on Trump, 62% feel that. So even those who have mixed feelings about Trump, like my truck driver I was telling you about, gets that he screwed this one up.
Okay.
All right? And it's also true, very somewhat concerned about it, Trump made economic decisions that benefit the wealthy and big corporations. These are all over 50%. Donald Trump has too often made decisions that have ignored or overruled the advice of health and medical experts.
Yes.
And the big one, Donald Trump failed to take the decisive action we needed to stop the virus in the early stages. 57% overall, 63% mixed on Trump feel that that's a big concern.
Okay.
The mixed messages from the Trump administration and lack of support for healthcare workers are the most concerning. And other takeaways, the share of Americans who know somebody who has a job loss due to the pandemic has risen dramatically over the past week. Well, we just saw that with the numbers.
Can't avoid it.
Still, the number who think the worst is yet to come has also continued growing and has reached a new high. They've increasingly put their trust in state and local government and trust Fauci and Cuomo in particular to tell the truth about the coronavirus pandemic. So remember, it's a depression if you're out of work, and it's a recession if you know somebody out of work.
Yes. Okay.
So we're getting into depression territory here. But this is the most interesting thing here, I thought, for me. Please indicate how much you trust the following to tell the truth when it comes to coronavirus. Fauci, he's got a plus 57.
Okay.
Trust 65, distrust 8.
Yes.
Cuomo's a plus 17, Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
Mike Pence is a plus 2, and Donald Trump is a minus 8.
Okay.
Right? People do not trust Trump to tell the truth about what's going on here. So, yes, I get he likes the gaslight, and yes, I get that these stupid non-informational press conferences like yesterday where absolutely no news whatsoever came out of it. And Trump used the time to tell us the military is really cracking down on drug cartels.
Yes.
I mean, a complete, total waste of time, but he's got to have one every day because he can't have his rallies.
Yeah. Surprising.
They're not helping him.
Electoral map.
They are not helping him. Americans think Trump needs to focus more on health, support more aggressive social distancing, and fully 2/3 of Americans, 68%, including 63% of independents and a 48% plurality of Republicans, oppose Trump's specific call to reopen the economy by Easter. Now, as Ron Ziegler used to say, inoperative.
Yes, right. Forced to abandon that.
And so if you're looking at the tracking polls, if you're looking at people who are responding to this, Trump is not getting high marks. And so you may not see a precipitous decline in his approval ratings, but just as there is a disconnect between whatever you used to think of Trump in terms of how he's handling the economy, and let's see how he handles it now, and his unwavering support, which was 41 to 44, and with his big rally around the president bump, he got it up to 45. Whether that will stay the same or whether that will drop remains to be seen. It's not going to go up. And the only way it goes down is if his own party begins to desert him. Again, Jimmy Carter got 30s because Democrats are willing to abandon somebody they didn't feel was doing the job. Republicans are not willing to do that because they're a cult. Yes. And it's mostly made up of white evangelicals. They don't tell you that, but it's true.
Mm-hmm. No,
and they won't abandon him because they just think it's like Job and the plagues and you just got to get through this. So why should any facts on the ground actually change what you're doing? Which is why there are still pastors who, despite court orders and ordering from the state governors, are still having large Sunday services. Not most, 90% are not doing this, but the ones who are endangering their constituencies and their flocks. And you'll still see this because, it's biblical. So they're making a mistake of biblical proportions. And, we're going to see the consequences of that when it runs rampant, for example, in Georgia, because Brian Kemp just found out that you can actually have asymptomatic spread. What I'm saying is don't expect the numbers to drop quickly. They won't. It takes a while for this to sink in. And even when it does, there will be a disconnect between telling pollsters I approve of his performance because he just did something in the last 10 minutes. Thank goodness he finally did. And saying, yeah, I'm going to vote for this guy in November.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe they should ask those questions side by side.
Well, they do. And, Biden's got essentially nationally a 6-point lead.
I should stop telling him what to do then.
So the other side of the coin, by the way, the Democratic primary has been over for a long time. You'll still see disaffected leftists on social media especially complaining about the fact that it's not over yet or Bernie's not going to drop out or how dare you tell us and this, that, and all this other nonsense. It's over. Biden's going to be the nominee. All right. And there's some nice articles about why disaffected leftists just have such a hard time with that. And it's interesting because polling shows, for example, that one of the things that disaffected leftists dislike and makes them so different than the rest of us Democrats is they cannot stand Democratic leadership.
That is true.
And that's talking about people like Nancy Pelosi, who we revere, and they can't stand. And for some reason, we can't have a nice conversation about this.
No. Well,
and that's the problem right there. So we're coming from such different places, particularly in the middle of a crisis where you'd think you ought to really put all of this stuff aside, and they won't.
Well, you would think, but
it's early, and so by the time you get to be November, but there's still people who say, well, fine, I'm either not voting or I'm voting for Trump. And then, the rest of us say, you not only don't like Nancy Pelosi, you're also saying this stuff. And so, why should I even pay attention to you? But, it's not all doom and gloom. There's a nice piece by Matt Iglesias in Vox today. Biden can unite progressives and swing voters with one simple trick. We didn't say that, but you might have.
Okay. Oh, all right, good. I thought that, he might have invoked that meme. Sure.
Do I have to
build anything here? What's going on? Does it work on
slot
what you could
machines?
Do? What?
Focus on climate change.
True. That would be helpful.
The environment is the biggest driver of doubts about Trump among his wavering supporters.
Yeah. Oh.
And even leftists like focusing on the environment.
Okay. Yes, sure. They would
Those
take
wavering Trump voters, as you might
some
expect, take a
solace,
mix of
perhaps.
liberal and conservative positions on various policy questions. This is a CCES poll. Okay.
Okay.
And Trump's 2016 supporters, who aren't necessarily backing him in 2020 by generation, planning to vote for a Democrat. It's a small percentage among the silent generation, slightly larger among boomers, Gen X, even bigger, and with millennials, it's enormous. So Trump 2016 supporters who are millennials and Gen Z are 20% of them. And of them, about slightly less than half are planning to vote for a Democrat already, and slightly more than half aren't sure. You want to get them, go environment.
That's not bad advice. I don't know what kind of results it yields, but I think it.
Well,
I mean,
wavering
works
Trump
better
voters
than
lean
standing
left
there
on climate. I mean, that's what
sticking
the
your
poll
finger up at
says.
'em.
Immigration's tricky. You can't win them on that, but you
Right.
can win them on climate.
Yes.
This is one of those things where you could say, I told you to listen to the scientists on the pandemic. Now listen to the scientists on climate. What the heck
that's a
is
good
wrong
pivot.
with you people?
And everyone loves a good pivot.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's a good strategy that I think people should really incorporate.
Okay.
Well, if you think this was bad, wait till
Sure.
climate hits.
Yes. True also. I've even seen some people arguing for a link between the two in terms of encroachment on environments where
Well, you could.
these
I mean, depending upon the
coronaviruses would
context.
live.
But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter
Makes
is
some sense.
that Democrats really do need to finish consolidating.
Yeah.
And, part of the issue here, and I think Amy Walter brings this up all the time, it's not surprising that Biden is leading Trump in just about every poll.
Right.
Because we're in the middle of a pandemic and everybody's watching Trump non-perform.
Yes.
And that'll sink in, and like Katrina, it's going to stick. When you get closer to the election and they start focusing on Biden, then Biden's ratings, whatever you want to call them, favorability or I'll vote for him, whatever, it's going to drop a little bit. And Republicans should consolidate around Trump. And therefore, that's why people always say, whatever it looks like now, it's going to be closer when it comes to November. Fine. But the things that are making this a referendum on Trump are only getting reinforced to the point where it's still going to be a referendum on Trump in November. It doesn't matter what kind of negative advertising you have against Biden. It's still going to be a referendum on Trump. He was the one in charge of this pandemic. He was the one that screwed up. He's the one that put Jared Kushner in charge. It's going to be a referendum on Trump. He cannot escape that.
Yes.
And that's why I continue to tell people I can't predict who's going to win or not win, but I can tell you Trump is not the favorite.
Right. Well, I'll buy that. Not
Now,
now.
if you rely on your, we always do it this way, so we're going to do it tomorrow. You want to rely on economic models? Go right ahead.
I would not recommend that at the moment.
Well, go ahead, do it.
I mean, I
And
guess you
tell,
could.
Tell me who's the favorite.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. Right. 10 million new jobless claims in the last 2 weeks. How's the economy doing? Oh, yeah. Wait a second.
Yes, but YOLO, nothing matters, and fine, and everybody thinks he's doing a great job in the economy. Yeah. You haven't polled yet after these numbers to tell me you think he's doing a great job in the economy.
That's
Well, they
true.
won't blame him.
Possible.
Why? Because they never have before. Well, do you think something has changed in the past month? Or not?
No. I'll say
Well, then you're not paying attention.
Aha. Well, then I just
the world
won the
has
race
changed.
for
It's not
governor
the
of
same
Georgia.
world. We're not going back to what it was. And, if you want to focus on the models because you do models and you don't do anything else, then maybe the direness of those death curves that we were talking about earlier hasn't sunk in yet because you don't want to pay attention and you don't like to talk about that stuff, but it's still there. Death don't care.
Yeah.
It's coming. It don't care whether you care about it or not or pay attention or not. It's coming anyway.
Yes. I would suggest that death sharpen its focus a little bit, but rarely listens to me.
Yeah. So you have all of that.
Okay.
And then finally, there's some interesting medical news here. Again, we're still awaiting CDC's talking about masks. And the latest entry, I think, is very good. It's from Tara Hale, who's a science writer, writes for Forbes. Should everyone wear a mask in public? Maybe, but it's complicated. Goes over a lot of the stuff we did on the Monday show.
Oh, good.
Right? It's
Still-
not so simple. And you really have to wear them properly. But my friend Jody Leonard, who is a risk communicator who has in the past, before she retired, was working with WHO, points out there's plenty of situations in previous pandemics, like in 2009, where the health minister in a different country, like Singapore, would take the approach, look, these masks are not perfect, and they're not a panacea, and they're not necessarily going to stop the pandemic.
Right.
But if you choose to wear them, let me explain to you how to wear them properly.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that message.
I don't think so. And it's necessary, too. I keep seeing pictures of people with what look like store-bought masks on and wearing them over their mouths and not their nose. I'm not certain where that comes from.
See, if you wore that British thong, the way that guy was advertising, it goes over your nose. It can't help it, if you're going to put it on. So
to wear otherwise. Yeah.
And then there's the origami. Did you see the origami one? Did I send you that?
The paper towel.
You can fold the paper towel into pleats. Mm-hmm. And then at the ends, you slightly bend each end over, but you put a rubber band in the bend and then staple it. So now you have things to put it on your ears, and then you open it up. It's a pleated mask. It goes on your ears, and you can make it at home, and it just takes a few minutes.
Yes, I saw that one. I circulated that as well, and I guess...
how well does it work? I don't know, but the point is, if you're going to wear it, take it off properly.
Yeah, I guess there's that. I got yelled at by a doctor.
That's a nice thing. You can throw them away and make another one.
True. By the way, most of the times that I've seen people make things out of paper towels, when they have written instructions, they very often say, well, maybe use 2 layers of paper towel when they make it. So you can experiment with it.
I don't know. The more layers, it's harder to breathe through. And here's another pro tip. Try breathing through your mouth, because if you try to breathe through your nose with these things, it's really uncomfortable. Just get used to being a mouth breather.
Well, it'll turn you into one.
Yeah.
I haven't yet experimented with the paper towel ones. It may be that they're just too uncomfortable. I had a doctor... not yell, but jump in on the thread the other day saying, that's not going to protect you, that mask. And I said, well, I know.
It's not supposed to protect you. It's supposed to protect
I said that. And then,
the other guy.
But then I looked at the profile and I said, okay, well, actually, this is a doctor. I said, well, I'm not supposed to protect you. But actually, you probably know that. Were you just trying to tell me that this doesn't make me invulnerable to the virus? Because I get that. That's good advice. I'll tell everybody that.
This is for asymptomatic spread.
That's what we meant.
And asymptomatic spread is something that's going to be talked about in the next few days. It's going to be part of the CDC recommendations when and if they come out. And, people have not appreciated. And that's one of the things about this article, which I like so much. Tariel takes, let's go to some of the stuff that she talks about. Not so much the specific recommendations, but she says, let's get one thing out of the way right at the start. If you've come to this article wondering if you should wear a mask to protect society at large from infection, the article won't answer the question for you. The CDC is considering the question because that's what responsible public health agencies do as evidence and circumstances change, and I'm awaiting their guidance like everybody else. What the article will do is discuss why the question's so complicated. Yeah, it really is. What factors are at play, what you want to consider in deciding whether to wear a homemade mask. It remains true that shortages in surgical masks means they go to the healthcare providers, and it remains true that most people don't properly wear N95 respirators.
Yes.
Okay.
So don't.
But the previous article she wrote addressed one main question: should you wear a mask to protect yourself from infection? You handled this, David. The answer is no. It doesn't protect you. That's not the point. Okay. Eli Perencevic, University of Iowa infection prevention specialist, who's interviewed in the article and a Twitter friend, said the question a month ago was, will they protect you? And probably not.
Yeah.
Okay. But the biggest reasons they won't protect the average wearer is that most don't wear them correctly, even when trained, and unconsciously engage in counterproductive behaviors such as touching the mask frequently or pulling it down so you can breathe through your nose and then putting it back up, which means you've just touched it, which means then you scratch your face under the mask and you haven't helped yourself. So why do healthcare workers wear them? Well, aside from the fact that they usually wear them correctly and have people telling them when they don't, there's other reasons. And further, it's still possible future evidence could change what we know now and reveal that wearing a mask really does protect wearers. But that evidence doesn't exist. But there's a more important question to address right now, one which was not addressed in the previous article, which is the hot question, in which even if I had addressed it before, it would be outdated now. As an update on March 1st noted in the article, it remains an open scientific question whether and which droplet-based respiratory viruses are transmitted this way. All the documentation for COVID viruses involve droplets, but now there's questions about aerosols. It didn't exist a month ago. The big question is, should everybody wear a mask to protect other people from infection? And the best answer for the moment, maybe, universal mask wearing might decrease asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic transmission. The evidence isn't strong, solid, or crystal clear, but it might be better to err on the side of trying it. It won't surprise me if the CDC shortly comes out with a mask recommendation to reduce community spread.
Yes, but they should hurry.
Right? Since the article a month ago, we have much more evidence of transmission, and the prevalence of the disease itself is far more widespread. Remember what I said about prevalence? You can't really do a test and expect it's going to be accurate if there's almost no disease in the community, because positives are going to be false positives. But when the prevalence goes up, the efficacy of the test gets better. And that's true with mask wearing as well. There's no point wearing masks if there's hardly any there. But now that we know it's there, that changes.
Yes, unless you were just practicing.
Eli Parentz says, the critical thing is that we're in a totally different part of the epidemic where the shift is we have to assume many of us are infected. So with social distancing, we're assuming everybody's sick, so it makes sense for the time being that the CDC is considering broadening mask recommendations. Not to protect the wearer, but protect the family members and others in the community.
Yes.
We're already doing social distancing. Maybe we should add that too. But you still have to preserve the real masks for the healthcare workers.
Yes.
And then she goes through the theoretical evidence, the peer-reviewed evidence, and an incomplete list, then the empirical evidence. And it's a very complete, thorough, with links. Cultural considerations, all of that's there. And that's what makes it so complicated. So what we know now, pre-symptomatic transmission likely accounted for up to 6 to 13% of new cases. Transmission of the disease may occur for up to 3 days before symptoms appear, according to the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. That's a CDC document that comes out every week. It may not require coughs and sneezes alone to transmit the disease. It might occur through respiratory droplets or indirect transmission. Speech and other vocal activities, such as singing, have been shown to generate air particles with the rate of emission corresponding to voice loudness. So the more you yell, the more transmission is going to happen. And so, people having a political argument are actually putting each other at risk.
Yeah, you need
if you don't tone it down.
For that. Oh, true.
Transmission of disease from infected people who don't know they're infected could have been as high as 86% in the early days of the epidemic.
Rand Paul. I'm not shouting. I'm lowering the risk, but Rand Paul, that was you.
Exactly. So what we need to know, one of the most challenging aspects of understanding this is transmission via droplets or aerosolization. Ed Young provides an excellent explainer on droplets and aerosolization. Everybody thinks they're right about masks. He has a new piece. The concepts of aerosolization and airborne transmission are very confusing, and I strongly recommend everybody read his article to understand it better and understand why we still lack crucial data about this. That's why CDC is taking their time.
Okay. All right.
Ed Young's piece also appropriately addresses the complexities of the question of universal mask recommendations. The more certain somebody is about something, especially non-experts, the more skeptical you should be of their claims.
Does she link to all these other articles?
Yes, she does.
Excellent. Okay.
It's a fantastic piece.
We'll turn
Did the
this piece over to
CDC
everybody.
or WHO mislead people? No. Both the CDC and the WHO have difficult jobs in finding and interpreting incomplete, complex, and sometimes contradictory evidence. Despite criticism of them, both organizations have the smartest people in infectious disease in the world, literally, working hard to do that job in good faith. They have many factors to consider. The messaging regarding masks was not wrong. It's highly irresponsible to claim they misinformed people, but they do have to adjust. And their messaging isn't always crystal clear. I'm adding that. I know that. I've worked with them.
Okay.
And they, like many brilliant people, they can be stubborn. Like if they came to some conclusion last week, you really have to be open to changing your mind this week. And it's not so much the scientists who are like that. It's their messaging people.
Oh, okay. Well, they have
We worked on this message for 3 months. Now you want me to change it by this afternoon? Well, there's new stuff that came out. Yeah, but you know how much? I don't really care how much work there is.
Well,
every organization, you have that. And CDC is no different.
Okay. Well, they better get used to it. They have a long haul ahead of them.
So I'm going to give you that Ed Young article. We won't necessarily go over the whole thing, but here's the everybody's right about masks thing, because that's really good.
Everybody's right. And this is great. Oh, everybody thinks they're right. Oh, well.
Everybody thinks they're right.
Dang. I thought I was.
Just like politics.
Right. Okay. Well, we're used to that concept. All right. We'll add that to the mix, too. How are we wrong? I'll have to read that. Okay.
Yep.
But yeah,
Alrighty.
okay. We'll add that and add to the collection of resources, ways to make your own emergency masks if you don't have any access to it. There's varying levels of simplicity to them. It doesn't get much easier than folding one out of paper towels, though.
Right.
Okay.
Alrighty. So today's Thursday. That's it
Yeah,
for this week, and I'll talk
right.
to you on Monday if we're still around.
All right. No more facts until Monday.
Right. I'll be back with septic stories and all sorts of other interesting things. And, take care, wash your hands. And if you wear a mask, remember to learn how to doff them and take them off properly.
Right.
And then wash your hands again.
And if you do make them out of paper towel, you can practice with shaving cream.
Yeah. And then, when you're done with it, you can make it into a paper plane and send it over to your neighbor.
And shave. So.
No, that's irresponsible. Don't do that unless you're Rand Paul's
Oh, right.
neighbor.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. Right. In which case, I encourage it, and please be my guest. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, Greg. Be well. Yeah. Wash your hands. Call the septic guy in case you run out of soap or hand sanitizer. All right. That brings us almost up to the break. So there's just no point in starting a news story now, but there are an awful lot of them. And let's see. We'll start off on the other side with, I'll tease you with this one. I see Marcy Wheeler out there making an excellent point in rebuttal to one of Donald Trump's worst points, I guess. Oh, we'll read you the tweet anyway, and maybe we'll read the larger article afterwards. The day Andrew Cuomo declared an emergency up in New York. See, Trump is busy blaming New York's problems on New York. He actually says New York got a late start in reacting to the virus. That's why they're having such a hard time up there. But of course, they reacted sooner than anybody because they had more of the virus sooner than anybody else did. But that's the way he's blaming it on a Democrat. But the day Andrew Cuomo declared an emergency, March 7th, Trump was hosting a party at Mar-a-Lago, where, as you know from listening to this show, COVID was likely spread among the guests. It was 6 more days before Trump was persuaded to declare an emergency himself. Who got a late start? Yeah, well, of course, facts don't matter. That's still the one place where LOL YOLO nothing matters. But for the rest of us, it doesn't change his story, but we understand it differently. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's see. Okay, where are we going to pick up from here? Yes, right. We have Empty Wheels tweet. I guess I can roll back and set the whole thing up and or just jump to her article. We'll do that. If New York got a late start, then Trump hasn't even started yet, she says. And here's how it first illustrates it with some Donald Trump tweets. So I guess we could set the tone by actually reading some of those. Somebody, he now tweets, I guess, when? Recently. Somebody, please explain to Cryin' Chuck Schumer, and I see this one just coming across my desk here. So let's see, 8:57, just before the show started. So you see the new tone in evidence here, right? The new somber, serious Trump. Somebody, please explain to Cryin' Chuck Schumer that we do have a military man in charge of distributing goods, a very talented admiral, in fact. He forgot his name, of course. New York has gotten far more than any other state, including hospitals and a hospital ship. We've gotten hospitals. Did you know that they sent whole hospitals to New York? But no matter what, always complaining. It wouldn't matter if you got 10 times what was needed. It would never be good enough. Unlike other states, New York unfortunately got off to a late start, which is completely backwards. You should have pushed harder. Stop complaining and find out where all these supplies are going. Still accusing them of stealing the supplies. Cuomo working hard. That's, I guess, supposed to not alienate him from Cuomo. Cuomo must have found some leverage over Trump, and I wish he would share that with everybody else, but Trump seems determined, or else maybe it's a curveball thrown at the end, like, no, see, I still do have that somber tone. I said Cuomo's working hard. Well, at this point, Marcy chimes in. New York and the nation and the world would have been far better off if Andrew Cuomo had imposed a shutdown on March 7th when he declared an emergency. But still, that was 6 days before Trump bothered to declare an emergency. I'm editorializing a little bit here. Perhaps because he was busy throwing a party on March 7th at which COVID was probably spread among his guests. You know, we've heard about that one. It would have been, New York that is, far better off if it had imposed a statewide shutdown instead of imposing a containment zone in New Rochelle on March 10th. It would have been better off had Cuomo issued a stay-at-home order on March 16th instead of simply shutting down non-essential businesses and canceling gatherings of more than 50 people. But from that day on, Cuomo's measures were more severe than anything Trump has recommended, which to this day, I guess he only recommends seniors and those with pre-existing conditions stay at home, which is a mistake. I was probably too late. I'm sorry. I thought she was admitting something here. No, it was probably too late. Not me. You made the mistake. When Cuomo issued a full stay-at-home order on March 20th. Nevertheless, it was just one day after California's, the only earlier full state stay-at-home order, and it was actually before Washington's. And then parenthetically, she adds here, Tuesday, Dr. Birx repeatedly commended Washington's response. So if they're happy with Washington's response, although who knows, maybe Trump isn't, but Birx is supposed to be speaking for the administration. Washington, good, and New York, bad, except New York went first. So yes, New York didn't respond as early as it should have, and Bill de Blasio, and mayor of New York City, of course, in particular, was irresponsible and slow. But New York has always been and remains far ahead of what Trump has done. So if Trump wants to accuse New York of responding slowly, he should first explain why he has always lagged New York's response. Good point. Won't work. He won't explain it. And he'll just say, that's not true. We were first. I did everything perfectly. We're already set up for that one. But even yesterday at the press conference, new, somber, serious Trump was arguing with Fox News's White House reporter yesterday when the Fox, I don't remember who the hell the Fox News White House reporter is, referenced the dismissal of the National Security Council's pandemic preparedness staff, and Trump just flat told him that's not true. That's a false story. You shouldn't repeat false stories. Fox guy, being a Fox guy, couldn't exactly fight with the president and say, give me a break. Of course, are you denying that again? It's a true story. Stop telling everybody lies. But instead, he said, well, I'm just saying that some people believe that story, and I'm quoting them. And if they believe that, what would you say to a person like that? Some kind of mealy-mouthed dodge. But Trump even Trump didn't believe that one. And it was a rather remarkable exchange. There were a few semi-interesting moments, but like Greg said, mostly didn't make any news. I guess the closest they came to making news, I mean, when they make news in that administration, they really make news. I mean, they manufacture it on the spot. And addressing the situation on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, the super-duper military man that was mentioned in Trump's tweets, I think might have been caught off guard. He stepped up to discuss the situation, and I don't know how many people he convinced, but we're working really hard, and don't worry about it. The aircraft carrier is fine, and it's totally not incapacitated, and all rumors of that sort are nonsense. So let's talk a little bit about how much we hate Iran for a while. That'll help get us off the subject. But they did say, well, we're implementing some new protocols and how to deal with people who fall ill. And, I guess what he meant by implementing some new protocols also meant, teaching people to wash their hands and not touch their face. I don't know how well that works in the enclosed environment of a naval group. But, they said we have some new protocols to deal with. And he didn't really specify exactly what they were, and probably for good reason. And but Trump, I guess, wasn't satisfied with that. So while he had the admiral at the podium, he blurted out from the side of the stage, what he thought might sound like a different protocol than we usually use that might be recognizable as different, I guess. Although it wasn't clear even after the exchange whether, he had discussed this at all with people in the Navy. But they might agree to it anyway because they make up their policy on the spot. He shouted out from the side of the stage, And I think I wrote down somewhere exactly the words he used, but it's hardly even matters. But he said, well, for instance, not so many people will be getting off the ship at various ports anymore. And he just kind of throws it out there. And then there's sort of this brief silence, and then the admiral says, correct. And that might be correct. I mean, that's a pretty sensible policy, but it's also very vague. Not so many people will be getting off at various ports anymore. We don't know whether he described it correctly or not. Maybe it's a complete ban on leaving the ship when they come into port. Maybe it's not really much of it. I don't know. But the admiral didn't correct them any. He just said, correct. But, quietly. But then Trump sort of let us in behind the scenes, gave us a peek at why I think that maybe he was making it up as he goes along, because I guess he thought he was clarifying, but he only made it worse by then saying, I think we've probably decided that's, that we agree on that, right? But then again, not even a second correct, just sort of silence from the admiral. And so the hint that I picked up on was, we talked about how we have to still talk about this and that we hadn't made a decision, sir. And now you've made it look like we've come to a conclusion. And, which may or may not mean that behind the scenes Trump said, well, that's what I want. And the Navy said, well, I mean, generally speaking, it's probably a good policy to minimize this, but that's not the way logistics in the Navy work. We can't just say nobody's going to get off the ship. But we probably should do that. We should probably, again, pushing back just to be realistic. But we could work towards that. We should want to do that. Okay, well, let's agree not to announce the specifics of the policy until we have it hammered out. All right. Sure, let's go have our press conference. Well, probably we agreed what I said, though, right? Yeah, I think that was the dynamic that was going on. All right. Well, that's at least some examination of some of the other stuff that was in the news. You can tell all the people I read the news to you now. All right. Let's see. One other bit of news. I don't know what to make of it exactly, but it doesn't sound particularly good. CNN on Twitter yesterday evening mentioning Hong Kong closing all beauty parlors, clubhouses, nightclubs, karaoke rooms, and mahjong centers. I don't know what percentage of the economy that represents or why that selection. But the deal is that they're closing all of these gathering places. Why? Because the city is fighting a second wave of coronavirus. And everybody's been afraid that might happen. And, we're not sure what it indicates yet. And I don't think we have a medical perspective on it yet. But that's out there and something for us to keep an eye on. Attention, Donald Trump. Again, advanced warning of something coming from out of Asia. Attention, Brian Kemp. I guess we need to send engraved invitations. They used to say, what do you need? What are you waiting for? An engraved invitation? We'll have to send them all to Republican policymakers and elected leaders. Just give them the heads up. Today's date, April 2nd. I heard it April 1st. It's going to be easy to count days from there. And this is, I think, the second warning about possibility of second waves and reinfection coming out of Hong Kong alone. So let's just not let them get away with pretending they never heard about that one. You can read the specifics yourself, I guess. I will give you just a short blurb, but what more do you need to know? Well, if there is anything, and this article can answer it, it will be in our roundup today. There you go. Speaking of yesterday's press conference, I watched a little bit of it, enough to notice that OAN, One America Network, or One America News, sometimes referred to as OANN, One America Network News, or One America News Network, I don't know or care which way it is, got two questions, by the way. Each one attempting to try and, bolster the president by throwing him a softball in which he could attack Iran or yell about Mexico or something like that. But more news about OAN. I have here the tweet of Oliver Darcy, senior media reporter from CNN, noting that the White House Correspondents Association has voted to remove OAN from the rotation for a seat in the briefing room. Over the last couple of days, this is kind of interesting, I think in the light of the story about firing the organizer at the Amazon warehouse and coming up with the reason that we're firing him because he violated social distancing protocols, which seemed a little odd and a bit of a stretch. Well, here it is again. The White House Correspondents Association, though, has voted to remove OAN from the rotation for a seat in the briefing room. Over the last couple of days, OAN has continued to show up to the briefings despite new restrictions limiting reporters, the number of them in the room, aimed at increasing social distancing. And apparently they have a certain number of, well, they have a limited number of seats in the room, of course, and they are spacing people out. So a certain number of seats are designated for the reporters of the day, and there's a sort of a rotating basis, and I guess the big networks maybe get to send their people, and then a rotating cast of other smaller media players. And in order to enforce the social distancing, the seats are assigned and they're labeled, and the other seats you're not allowed to sit in. But OAN keeps like squeezing into the room and standing, which you used to be able to do when we didn't have to socially distance ourselves, but now you can't. So that's what they used as an excuse, and at this point I'll take almost any excuse. But that has the conservatives up in arms, of course, and they're angry, and they think that CNN should be the one that gets banned from the room. But that's not going to happen because I think it's their representative who happens to head the White House Correspondents Association at the moment. But I don't know. That might improve the quality of the questions asked. Not really sure. I can't guarantee you anything. All right, let's see. Other things to add to the mix. I mentioned when Greg was talking about it earlier. I don't think I have any articles about it per se. All the action here was on Twitter. We know about the kooks, not exactly led by, but certainly with the participation of kook in chief James O'Keefe and his Project Veritas are participating in a gigantic waste of time / activity to the detriment of our healthcare community, perhaps worse than accusing them of stealing all of the protective equipment, but maybe not, yet to be seen. But the new craze among super ultra Trump fan conservatives and QAnon people, etc., that is working at a disconnect with where the Trump White House is going on all this. They don't believe in, and there's different stripes of conspiracy theories. Some of them, are the coronavirus is a hoax thing, full on. Others are of a bent. They say, I don't believe that the virus is a hoax or not a real thing, but I think that they're exaggerating the effects of it and trying to scare us for some reason. And I don't really know what it is. And the idea that the president is, okay with shutting down major portions of the country, et cetera, is sort of unexplained by Trump fans who believe that the whole thing is hype. Like, okay, well then why is he sending hospital ships? And why is he, doing all the things that he finally is doing? Or why are our Republican governors everywhere finally catching up on this stuff? They don't have to answer your question, so they just blow by it. So now they have this thing on under the hashtag film your hospital or film the hospital. I don't know what the hashtag is. Don't look. It's terrible. And the idea is they go and do drive-bys of the hospital and film on their cell phones. And what they usually are filming, and most of them live in areas which haven't been hard hit yet, and they film their local hospital, and it's quiet there. And very often the parking lot is mostly empty, and there's no people dying on the streets or brains exploding out of people's heads. And so they say it's all fake. It's all a hoax. If there's such a crush on the hospitals, if hospitals are so overwhelmed with patients, why is there no activity out here? And of course, step one in unraveling the big mystery, isolation wards typically are indoors rather than outdoors. So you won't find any isolation ward. The patients need to be isolated. They're going to be isolated inside, not in the parking lot. And of course, with most hospitals no longer admitting non-critical patients, no longer doing elective surgery, not allowing any visitors for the patients who are there now, and doing all of that for various reasons, including getting ready for a surge, well, there will be fewer cars in the parking lot, right? The patients aren't commuting to the hospital. The ones who are there in isolation, the doctors and nurses account for some of them, yes, but no visitors, no elective surgeries. That's going to empty a lot of parking lots. But apparently these guys seem convinced that they're really on to something. Most of them don't get out of their car and don't actually enter the hospital looking for them. But a few of them, like James O'Keefe tried to do that. And a few others have tried to sort of sneak in and, don't do that, obviously. That's not a wise idea. But they sneak in. But once again, if you roam the halls, you're not going to see patients in isolation because those guys are in isolation. They're not in the halls. And as one rebuttal video that I saw circulated, maybe I can dig that up and share that with you, they did point out that, one of the problems with trying to do surreptitious video on your phone and walking through the hallways of the hospital and opening the doors and grabbing the door handles and pressing the elevator buttons and then going outside and then uploading your video on your smartphone touchscreen and then calling your best friend to say you should see what I just found at the local hospital by pressing that same screen to your face. He did make the good point of, in about 2 weeks, you'll find all the people you were looking for, but you could have avoided all that just by taking our word for it. So dangerous movements out there. Some are just driving by hospitals and taking video, but then alleging that this is evidence of a hoax of some kind. Others are derailing trains in an effort to crash into hospital ships, which, as is often the case with ships of all kind, hospital or otherwise, are in the water, which is where you generally do not put train tracks. It just was never really going to work out for that guy, but, he obviously had a tenuous grip on reality. Okay, let's see. Other things to dive into. Yes, big story circulated yesterday by David Farenthold, but I haven't really been able to untangle exactly what the hell's going on in this one. But everyone should know that the Secret Service has run out and wrapped up an emergency, as they say, an emergency contract. This was done on Monday, so not like before we knew everything was going to get bad. On Monday, and then the contract was signed yesterday, Wednesday, for $45,000 payment for rental of golf carts at Trump's Sterling, Virginia, Trump National Golf Course, where he starts to go around this time of year when the weather turns nice and before he can escape to Bedminster. He frequents this golf course. Hasn't been there that we know of. I thought this was very interesting wording that Farenthold used. The last outing that we know of was down in Florida on March 6th or 7th in that area where we were just talking about with Marcy's article. But, maybe he snuck out. We just don't know. So I like that phrasing. It's sort of a purportedly type of phrasing. We may find out later he snuck out. Anyway, and no plans, no announced plans. I mean, it would be obviously bad PR for him to announce plans to go golfing during the pandemic. But as it turns out, according to the article, by the way, golf courses in Virginia apparently not shut down. I think the logic here being that they still allow you to leave the house, even under shutdown orders. Most people are allowed to leave the house for exercise, for brief, what they think of as a walk around the house. Take the dog out for a walk. You walk around the block, whatever. But then I guess somebody must have convinced, I don't know why or how, the governor that, golf is outdoor activity. And there's some social distancing sort of built into golf. It's a very big course. There's a lot of people could be out there, but they're broken up into small groups by the nature of the game. And I guess back in the days when they were saying, well, no gatherings over 50, all right, 20, all right, 10. Even so, you could say, well, we're just a gathering of 4. But now the rule, they break you up even more. Everybody either has to, I guess, walk the course, which is good exercise, or take their own golf cart. So interesting. Now there are 4 times as many golf carts going to be necessary on every outing, and I guess no 2 Secret Service people can ride in the same golf cart either, so the price is way up. I say I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, only because Farenthold's story reports that the rental is not made directly from Trump's golf course, as has sometimes been the case in the past, and in which case it is much easier to point out, oh, this is profiteering by Trump. They rented, as they are now more frequently doing, from third-party vendors. I guess that's the thing. And I just have a bunch of golf carts. I don't own a golf course. I just have a large quantity of golf carts, and I will rent them to you. All right, fine. No word on whether or not the president owns that rental company, but it's not called, anything sneaky like DJT Golf Carts LLC, Capital Golf Carts or something like that. It's in the article, not by any means the most important piece of the article until we find out who is the ownership of that LLC. And I guess the other outstanding question is that for some reason they have designated this an emergency contract. And I'm not sure that we've gotten to the bottom of why that designation was put on it, but it seemed important, so Farenthold included it. My initial questions are either maybe it had to be an emergency contract in order to get the otherwise non-essential personnel necessary to come into the office and conclude the contract, but then why conclude the contract if he's not going golfing? I don't know. That leads me back to, well, obviously this seems like a way to steer money to a crony or something. And even though I'm not going golfing, I'm still going to shoot you the $45,000 for it. So it's either that, or is it an emergency thing? If I designated an emergency situation, can I pay for it out of the $500 billion slush fund? Maybe that's it. I don't think anybody knows yet. That's, I think, where the story goes next, I guess. But another big story about contracts that was reported by the Washington Post yesterday was that apparently at some point the contract that the federal government had with some outside provider to maintain what inventory we had in a national stockpile of ventilators lapsed last summer. And I guess they were brand new to the job. They were only like 2.5, 3 years into it, and they lost the contract. I don't know where it is. I didn't put a reminder on my phone or my calendar. I don't know what it was, whether it was deliberate or not. They might have been seeking, we have got to make great deals. They might have been seeking a bargain in it and whatever it is, but they let it lapse. And as a result, Trump has announced, of course, that that the federal government has sent out 10,000 ventilators to states in need, and some states not in need too. Not yet, anyway. But as it turns out, about 2,000 of the 10,000 are not in working order, and it is suspected that may have something to do with the fact that they let the maintenance contract drop, which brings us to the interesting juxtaposition tweeted out by our good Twitter friend Greg Green, who says, contracts of the Trump administration, a guide he offers us. The one renewed, golf carts for the president's security detail in the middle of a pandemic. And remember, on an emergency basis, this one was renewed. One that lapsed, maintenance for ventilators stockpiled to save lives in the event of that very pandemic. What do you know? Pretty amazing. And he links to the New York Times coverage of that one. I'm sure the Washington Post has also covered that. But for diversity's sake, we'll quote one of each, I guess, in the roundup. I thought that was a good juxtaposition. I mean, a bad, terrible juxtaposition, but a good thing to point out in terms of differentiating between the different priorities under the Trump quote-unquote administration. All right, we've run up against our next break. That's fine. Gives us a chance to choose the best of the best for the next couple of stories here. Man, there are a lot of it. So tune in to see how we solve the problem, or answer the question anyway, of what's the next most important thing we can leave you with today. And I don't know that I'll have the right answer for that one, but we're going to give you something fun anyway. Oh, yes, I guess we can at least tease this one. Eventually, we got to read one of these Vanity Fair stories from Gabriel Sherman. Which one will it be? I don't know. Maybe the latest. But you'll, of course, since we were talking about ventilators, remember that Trump expressed extraordinary doubt about the necessity of the number that Cuomo was requesting. We now have an answer about who told him that it would be okay to deny that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Okay, was the question burning with you for the last 2 minutes? The answer is in Gabriel Sherman's tweet about his own article in Vanity Fair, which is chiefly about other stuff, but he'll answer the question for us very quickly. Kushner told Trump that Cuomo didn't need 30 to 40,000 ventilators. Great. And this, again, the talk of the town, both here in Vanity Fair article, I guess it's hinted at, and I think Politico focused on it with a little more precision. But yeah, as Greg told you, Jared Kushner somehow finding himself or elbowing his way into a prominent role in coronavirus response. He always sort of was there. He kept people kept referring to as having a shadow working group parallel to Mike Pence's. And and there's some I don't know. I've seen some I guess excerpts from, I don't know whether it's from Vanity Fair or Politico's writing about it, but they really get to the heart of it. That essentially Jared is saying, well, I'm not a doctor or an epidemiologist, but I've been Googling stuff and I've read some books. Amazon's still working. I ordered some books and I read some stuff about disease, and I'm also rich, and so I figured, what the hell? I'll get in on the action here for some reason. Well, let's see. We'll read a bit of Gabriel Sherman's take on things because he's always got interesting stuff and puts it well. The Jared Kushner nugget isn't immediately obvious from the title. The campaign panicked inside Trump's decision to back off his Easter coronavirus miracle. That's an interesting topic all by itself. Subheader here: an impulsive promise, parentheses, his view was, I need to show people there's a light at the end of the tunnel, led to Fauci pushback. Poll numbers and a friend in a coma, remember that one, pushed Trump to reverse course. And as it turns out, I don't know whether they mention him in here or not, reporters, I guess, have figured out, I guess there really is a friend in a coma, and they know who it is, and so it's a real person, and I wasn't entirely sure that it was going to turn out to be, but I guess that part of the story so far is true. All right, what does Gabe have for us here? The national debate set off by Donald Trump's announcement that he wanted churches packed on Easter was, like so many Trump crises, a self-inflicted one. In the days after Trump tweeted that we cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself, remember that one? His medical advisors, led by Dr. Anthony Fauci, implored Trump not to relax the government's social distancing guidelines. Trump dug in. His view was, remember, I need to show people that there is light at the end of the tunnel, a former West Wing official told me. Under pressure, members of the coronavirus task force discussed privately how parts of the country might be opened in April, but cautioned Trump not to get locked into a specific timetable given the deteriorating conditions in New York hospitals and ominous upticks in cases in New Orleans, Detroit, and elsewhere. They discussed it internally, but they never intended Trump to announce it, a Republican working with the task force told me. Does that ring a bell from something earlier in the show? That's why I think you're looking at the same story here as you were looking at with whatever new policy the Navy is going to impose on personnel leaving the ship when they come into port. That again, I think they had the discussion and Trump said, okay, nobody gets off the boat. Or who knows? For all I know, he said, everybody gets to go. And they said, no, nobody gets off. Whatever. But I don't think that they settled it, and they probably agreed to end their meeting by, in the buzzword world, we'll circle around, we'll table this and circle back for a discussion later and formulate a policy. But then Trump blurts it out, and says, we probably agreed that it was going to be this thing. And the Navy admirals just say, again, governance by Wikipedia editing. Right now the Navy is going to have to go back and make that its policy and try and find a way to justify it. Back to the Easter thing. Trump's impulsive decision and its messy aftermath consumed the West Wing during the critical week that governors were pleading with the White House to deliver medical supplies before hospital systems began to collapse. It was totally crazy, the Republican told me. Dr. Fauci, Lindsey Graham, and others raced to convince Trump that an Easter opening would be cataclysmic and a cataclysmic error that would cost millions of lives. This is a very, very stressful situation for everybody, including me, Fauci told me, Gabe, that is, in a phone interview on Monday. By last weekend, Fauci's arguments broke through. Trump agreed to extend the social distancing guidelines until the end of April. So Lindsey Graham actually almost trying to be helpful for a change in that one. And by the way, just for note for the record, that in the last couple of days, Trump has been saying, I'm going to hold the deaths to about 250,000 or maybe even less than 250,000. You should all be thanking me. What a great job I did. Millions of people could have died, but they won't. Those now counts as lives I saved, although they really count as lives he cost by screwing everything else up. But you'll also recall that part of the claim from the other day was there were all these other people trying to get me to open the government, like at Easter, or open the economy at Easter. But I pushed back on them, which is, of course, the exact opposite, and another episode, therefore, of How to Read a Trump Comment. Trump's latest tonal and tactical shift, and almost certainly not the last, was driven by several factors, both personal and political. Trump learned that his close friend, here's the fact now, 78-year-old New York real estate mogul, because what other friends does he got? Stan Chera, I don't know if I've pronounced it right, Chera, had contracted COVID-19 and fallen into a coma at New York Presbyterian. Boy, did that hit home. Stan is like one of his best friends, said prominent New York Trump donor Bill White. I don't know. Is Bill White also a real estate developer, or did he do something else? Anyway, Trump also grew concerned as the virus spread to Trump country. Yeah. The polling sucked. Oh, no. The campaign panicked about the numbers in red states. They don't expect to win states that are getting blown to pieces with coronavirus, a former West Wing official told me. From the beginning of the crisis, Trump had struggled to see it as anything other than a political problem, subject to his usual arsenal of tweets and attacks and bombast. But he ultimately realized that as bad as the stock market was, getting coronavirus wrong would end his presidency. The campaign doesn't matter anymore, he recently told a friend. What I do now will determine if I get reelected. Or if people die, or if the economy crashes, or whatever. There's some alternative ways of looking at it, but not for him. For an ordinary West Wing dealing with a crisis of this magnitude, the chief of staff would be a central player, mediating, delegating, making the trains on time, or derailing to try to sink hospital ships, as the case may be. But Trump has only very intermittently been able to tolerate another person with power in his White House. Mick Mulvaney had essentially been a lame duck for months, and since he was pushed out in early March, there's been no chief of staff at all. Mark Meadows, whom Trump appointed weeks ago, only resigned his congressional seat on Monday to fill that post. How can you not have a chief of staff during one of the biggest crises in American history, a former West Wing official said. And the answer is, if you have no plans to address the crisis, then who cares whether you have a chief of staff? Jared Kushner, we got one of those. Jared Kushner, who's often been in competition with Trump's chiefs of staff, continues to be the central West Wing player, leading a shadow coronavirus task force that is more powerful than the official group led by Vice President Mike Pence. In conversations, Kushner has blamed HHS Secretary Alex Azar for the criticism Trump has received, according to a person in frequent touch with the West Wing. This was a total mess, Kushner told people when he got involved last month. I know how to make this government run now, he said, according to a source. There, only he can fix it. The White House downplayed tensions between Kushner and the task force. The vice president and Jared, what else are you going to do, right? The vice president and Jared worked so well together because they both view their roles through the lens of what's best for the American people and how do we best serve the president. Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley said, the task force has orchestrated a massive historic partnership between the public and private sector, coordinated the federal government's urgent response, and unleashed a whole of America, not whole of government, whole of America approach that will save lives, like you're on your own, make your own masks, get your own equipment, whole of America approach. In recent days, Kushner has advocated for his usual iconoclastic public-private approach, which usually means private approach. Like I will use the public money to pay myself privately to fix this problem. Drawing on business contacts. Last week, he called Wall Street executives and asked for advice on how to help New York. People briefed on the conversation said Kushner encouraged Trump to push back against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo after Cuomo gave an emotional press conference during which he said New York was short 30,000 ventilators. In a White House meeting around this time, Kushner told people that Cuomo was being an alarmist. I have all this data about ICU capacity. I'm doing my own projections, because he's modeling, and he's good at that, right? I'm doing my own projections, and I've gotten a lot smarter about this. New York doesn't need all the ventilators, Kushner said, according to a person present. During an interview on Hannity on March 26th, Trump said, I don't believe you need 30 or 40,000 ventilators. Kushner declined to comment, but the White House press shop sent a statement from Fauci. The interactions between Jared Kushner and Vice President Pence have added real value to the discussions at the coronavirus task force. They complement each other very well by providing information and opinions derived from shared and sometimes different perspectives. The bottom line and goal of both of them is always to get the facts straight and to act on and make decisions based on the best available evidence. I doubt very much he said that. Meanwhile, and this is a special for our listeners, are you ready? Trump is also consulting his longtime confidant, Hope Hicks. How does she do it? Whom Trump hired back in February, just in time for coronavirus. Hicks has been serving as chief communications officer for Fox Corporation, the parent of Fox News, prior to being rehired. No surprise there. Officially, Hicks reports to Kushner, but according to sources, Hicks is constantly with Trump. Weird. Hope is in charge of Trump's calendar, which means Jared is in charge of Trump's schedule, a Republican who deals with the White House said. Sources said Hicks prepares Trump for his daily task force briefings and advises him to act presidential. That's good advice. She's been trying to play to his better angels, or rent some, I guess, as the case might be. A former West Wing official said, given Trump's recent blow-ups at reporters Yamiche Alcindor and Jim Acosta, Hicks's influence has its limits. She has to be in front of him and petting him, I think, in order to make it work. Hicks declined to comment, but Gidley, who was often in meetings with her and Trump, said, no one has to give President Trump advice about being presidential. He is just a natural-born leader. And in this time of crisis, the country clearly sees the president is focused on the safety and security of the American people and always has their backs. In many ways, Hicks fills the role she unofficially occupied during her first West Wing tour, Trump Whisperer. She is shaping the White House's messaging, which puts the current communications director, Stephanie Grisham, out of the loop. For weeks, according to sources, Kushner has been looking to sideline Grisham, but has been unable to displace her because Grisham remains close to Melania Trump, whom Grisham did communications for when she worked in the East Wing. Jared doesn't tell Grisham what he's working on. At this point, Stephanie has just given up. A person close to Grisham said, "That is blatantly false and a sick attempt by someone to stoke division where there is none." Gidley said, he's doing great, right? Steph and Jared have been best friends since the campaign and have always worked very well together, and quite frankly are the best combination since peanut butter and jelly. I made that part up, but why not throw that one in there? Trump's press conferences for the last few weeks have mostly been rally substitutes, boastful, contentious, featuring Trump as pitchman, selling the great job the administration was doing and the beautiful future after the novel coronavirus had magically flowed through, while compulsively blame shifting to China, the media, governors, anyone but his own administration. But on Tuesday, the event turned somber, with Trump trying to put the best possible face on a terrifying set of metrics, 100 to 200,000 dead Americans. Even if, as Dr. Deborah Birx said, safety measures continued, that he'd been trying to push away and wish away for weeks. Whatever his tone, it will be very hard future to sell. And that's the end of the Vanity Fair entry. I provided for you yesterday, but didn't read from the one I had buried for some time, which I think I recalled, and I think I labeled it, but I can bring it up just to remind you to look for it. I'll probably stick it in today's roundup as well. But another Gabriel Sherman Vanity Fair piece. Yeah, there it is. There's no boogeyman he can attack. Angry at Kushner, Trump awakens to the COVID-19 danger. By the way, what was the date on that? When did he awaken? That was March 16th. I don't think he was fully awake at that, but I think that was the first round of somber Trump press conference commentary. All right. Again, lots more to bring to your attention. Let me see. I got to get back to our pocket view here. Maybe we'll check in with this one. Zeynep Tufekci, always difficult to follow and heading in another direction, but usually ahead of the curve. So she's got a tweet thread here from yesterday that maybe we should dive into. I think it'll help us clear some things up or be ready for a shift in coverage. The president and whatever he is, Trump, his group in the White House, a lot of people have been worrying or wondering for a long time about whether or not China is reporting the right numbers. There's every reason in the world to doubt that they are. And there have been some reports, they control total control of the news media there. And there's been some leaked citizen reports basically about the locked down province of Hubei, where Wuhan is. And that essentially there's word from people on the ground there that they've essentially been operations for cleaning up from the damage done by the virus, including burying the dead, is happening in ways that would tend to indicate that the number of those lost to the coronavirus there is much higher than they're willing to admit to. And I think we've pretty much established that they were very slow in admitting that we really had a huge problem here. But they certainly told us before we did anything at all about, actually reacting from our government. But apparently, in late December, they put out a warning. And by January, they were talking about people dying from this thing. And I as a rebuttal to the apparently the new Republican line too, along with I always knew it was a pandemic, is I was the only one doing anything. All the Democrats were the ones who were stalling and dragging their feet on it, and it doesn't jive at all with the January op-eds from numerous Democratic senators saying, "Hey, we're really not taking this thing seriously, and we've got to." Anyway, I do think there's reason to believe that maybe China wasn't giving us the right numbers. But I'm not going to go as far as Tom Cotton in saying that this was some sort of attack on the United States and it was done intentionally and we should bomb them as a result. Well, okay. So what's Zeynep talking about here? She was right on the mask thing, and she's right on a lot of things. She's got a good eye for this stuff. Let's read her tweet thread and see what we can get out of it. There are plenty of accurate things to blame the Trump administration for, but this is flat out false and dangerously so. She's talking about a tweet that she included from Pod Save America, of all places here. I'll read you the tweet, and then we'll head back to her comment. Pod Save America, January 1st, a timeline from them. China tells the Trump administration this is a horrific pandemic. January 20th, first American gets coronavirus. The time we lost waiting for him to realize what everyone was telling him is heartbreaking, and connects to the New York Times story and a tweet from Peter Baker. But Zeynep has differences. There are plenty of accurate things to blame Trump for, but this is flat out false and dangerously so. Ready? China lied and covered up until January 20th and even after. It's also gravely disrespecting the Wuhan whistleblowers who risked everything. Please delete this, she asks. I don't know if she got her wish, but it doesn't look like that. Maybe, let's see. Is this the next response to it? Maybe he burst into tears. Oh, she's reacting to another tweet here. We'll tell you which tweet she's reacting to. From Herman, HEHRMAN 001. Replying to Zeynep. They're referring, the Podcast America guys, I guess, to China's CDC director equivalent bursting into tears to our CDC director around New Year's Day. The New York Times article in their tweet states this. She answers, maybe he burst into tears because they were lying about all the crucial details. It's a theory. That is not China tells the Trump administration this is a horrific pandemic. On the other hand, Taiwan told the truth to the World Health Organization by January 1st, but who kept on parroting China's false claims for weeks. Everyone thinks partisanship and polarization erodes fact-based analysis only among their opponents. I can't construct a China told Trump of a horrible pandemic on January 1st, no matter how I slice and dice this. Just can't make it work. See timeline. And now she includes a piece from The Atlantic. Is it her own? Let's open it up and see. It is, and it is a February 22nd piece, How the Coronavirus Revealed Authoritarianism's Fatal Flaw, which I think we can all guess what it is. China's use of surveillance and censorship makes it harder for Xi Jinping to know what's going on in his own country. All right. Well, we don't have time to read that whole thing, but let's continue on with her thoughts in the tweet thread. I mean, she asks, is it so hard? We should have been prepared for this pandemic, which unfolded almost exactly like SARS, including cover up by China, except we got a less consistent clinical presentation, so much harder to contain. Why make China tell Trump when it did nothing of the sort? You know, why even, I guess she's worried about the attempt to blame Trump despite, even though the facts and the timeline that they give don't appear to be entirely truthful. Unless you have reporting nobody else has, this did not happen. If China told the World Health Organization of a horrible pandemic or even human-to-human transmission in early January, and WHO kept lying for many more weeks, time to set up the Crimes Against Humanity tribunals, which wouldn't be a bad idea at any rate, and I'd like to have some people looked into over here as well. She includes here another tweet replying to her complaints about Pod Save America here, which says, there is a difference between telling the U.S./WHO and broadcasting on Chinese media. The former one happened weeks earlier than the later. That's this person's theory, saying, well, China told us, but they didn't broadcast it to their own people. Well, next tweet involves another embedded tweet, this one from Jason Howell, who says, no, CDC was sending messaging about no evidence of human-to-human transmission well into January. Also, did not recommend any travel restrictions outside a small area until late February, only declaring a pandemic on March 12th. So, let's see. I'm not sure who he's referring to here. Oh, South Korea, Taiwan, and I don't know who else are we looking at here. And China. Don't trust China or the CDC, and they were right. There's some flags in here instead of the country names. I recognize Taiwan, but not the other ones. Okay, and Zeynep has to say about, yes, this is what happened. There absolutely needs to be an investigation into it. What did WHO, it's hard to just say what did who know. What did who know and when? See? It is a very, very good question. I hate to say this, but no guarantee we won't have future pandemics. That's always true. It's perhaps the most important question. China didn't inform us or the world, but yeah, there was no reason to wait even until January 20th. The signs were there, and countries like Taiwan and the people of Hong Kong, there we go, Hong Kong and Taiwan, leapt to action in the first week of January, but not because China told anyone anything. This time including the tweet that reads from someone else that reads, so counting from January 20th, despite China tipped on January 7th and ignoring things like the long incubation period, spreadable while asymptomatic, etc., see, that we knew in January, well, were not known then. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, not until later. How much time did Trump waste? And next tweet that's included in her responses from Greg Merklin, who comments, if our own intelligence services were still in the dark about this after Christmas, there's some splaining to be done. We pay them a crap ton of money to ferret these things out. Well, sometimes it doesn't work. But Zeynep has this to say about that. Yep, the rumors were there by then. Taiwan figured it out by sending a team to Wuhan in December and started January with mask production and distribution, travel ban, and tracing. They have 5 total deaths still, and they reopened their schools a month ago. Next one up, reacting to the tweet here that reads, can you please emphasize in your tweets that it was the Chinese government that covered up, not China? Chinese people around the world are getting blamed for something completely out of their control. To which she responds, yes, very true and important. It was the government of China, not the people of China. From the people of China, we've seen heroism, suffering, whistleblowing, heroic medical work, and also amazing journalism. And she cites Caixin, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, Caixin, has been amazing, for example. And I guess that kind of wraps it up. I'm not, nothing hammered down here, but I guess I just wanted to offer up early warning that credible reporting on the narrative of what came out of China may soon change and lay some more of the blame on the World Health Organization and less on the Trump administration, which I suppose the Trump administration might try to use to say, well, now you know why we rejected the World Health Organization's COVID-19 tests. I don't think that actually follows necessarily, but that may be the direction they go, and I guess we'll see whether there's any validity to that sometime in the near future. I guess the last thing I'll throw out at you before signing off for the day, some powerful opinion piece and editorial headlines that are out there. We won't be able to read them, of course, but I'll recommend them for your perusal later on. The first, actually, I should look for, where is the Boston Globe one, I think was the more blunt of the two that I had in mind. Let's see if I can't find that one rather quickly, although it's, like I said, been buried under a torrent. There we are. The Boston Globe out with the headline on their editorial, but the subheader is so much better. A president unfit for a pandemic. Well, that's not radical thought, is it, at this point? But the second line here, the subheader, much of the suffering and death coming was preventable. The president has blood on his hands, period. And only then do they launch into their editorial, which must, I'm sure, be blistering, and you can enjoy it afterwards. The other, an opinion piece in the Washington Post, I think from Jennifer Rubin, running under the headline, once again, you find yourself once in a while agreeing with Jennifer Rubin. Headline being, we must hold politicians responsible for deaths they could have prevented. This one actually illustrated with a picture of Brian Kemp, but applies just as easily to, it's Ron DeSantis, but it applies just as easily to Brian Kemp and Donald Trump. So you can read that one as a companion piece. And you can keep yourself entertained and informed for another hour by staying tuned for Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Shall we start down at the bottom and see if the international news is the most interesting? I'll read it over and blurt it out as quickly as possible after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right. Long story short, out in the Philippines, President Duterte says he's going to shoot lockdown violators in the street. Not a surprise for him. And a team of Chinese scientists seeking potential COVID-19 treatments have found extremely effective antibodies that block the virus from entering cells. Let's hope that's true.